Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Let's Talk program. I'm Herbert Herbert, and as per usual, we are here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category and you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line? Address it to the Let's Talk program in Cape Vaughan Radio Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis, or give us a call. Our numbers are 869-469-1616 and or 1700. Mondays to Fridays. And by the way, those are the numbers that you'll use to be a part of this evening's discussion. This is the Heavyweight Show. Edric W. Stanley is a businessman. Mark A.G. Brantley is a practicing lawyer. So is Theodore Hobson. And Alistair Yearwood is a businessman as well. They are part of our panel this evening. This evening, Nevis on the road to independence. Of course, most of you would know by now that Premier Vance Amory of Nevis has once more pulled out Section 113 of the Constitution, which in essence will finally give, if successful on a referendum vote, pave the way for Nevis to be an independent nation. We'll discuss that and we'll get some of the players involved in this evening's discussion. Again, the most important part of it, we want to hear from you. So you want to formulate your question or your comment and call us at 869-469-1616 and 1700. We'll bring in our panel in just a second, but first we will do a couple of things. First off, we will hear from the Premier of Nevis in one of his bids in making the case for an independent Nevis. We'll hear from the Nevis Reformation Party's leader, the Honorable Joseph Parry, as he terms it, educate the people of Nevis on this secession or this independence of Nevis. Then we'll hear from former and first Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Simeon Daniel. We'll contact him by phone, so we'll hear from him. We have one or two other folks we might hear from, and then we'll bring in our panel. So we'll go now to hear from the Premier Amory, but before that we tell you that the facilitators of this special edition of the Heavyweight Show, the Nevis Island Press and Public Relations Department, Cable TV of Nevis Limited, Web Hosting and Developers, Net.kn and St. Kitts, Eastern Caribbean Spa House Vaughan Radio. If you're listening my radio and you're at home, it is coming as available on Nevis on NTV Channel 8. Let's go to the Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Vance Amory.
What we are doing here is using the Constitution, the provisions of that Constitution, to move Nevis forward peacefully. We believe that Nevis has matured, that Nevis has come of age. We believe that the economy which we have labored to build is sound, solid, and has withstood a number of shocks, severe shocks, and we are still floating. I think once we can accept that, I want to say to you tonight that we are ready to take up the challenges of being an independent country, and we solicit the support of every single person here and who's listening and divisions everywhere, because this is for all of us.
That's the Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Vance Amory, on the campaign trail as he made the case for an independent Nevis. Now here is the Honorable Joseph Parry, the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, as he spoke with the Chamber of Commerce on St. Kitts.
I think you're going to have to stop use full autonomy so loosely. Independence is independence and autonomy is autonomy. Autonomy and independence can never be the same thing. The English language is very precise in terms of words and their meanings and so on. So Vance Amory is not talking about full autonomy. That is why you're being confused. Get that out of the way. The other thing is, I am asking, in terms of your question, I am asking for the costing to be done, for the studies to be done. Because I cannot give you definitely, as I sit here, what the cost will be. What I do know, that the figures that the Nevis Island government has presented to the public in terms of its cost for independence, those figures are not true. That much I know. I can tell you, in terms of the activities of the businesses here, and most of them are here, most of them are clearing their goods in Nevis and are being cleared in Sinkis as people have been led to believe. Some of them are paying their corporate taxes in Nevis, and some of them are not paying. Some of them are paying very little corporate taxes. And if they look at those figures, they will see those figures don't make any sense. But I'll go further and tell you, those figures have $2.5 million for regional and international bodies. Sinkis is paying $7.5 million right now. If we become independent, we have to pay the minimum just like Sinkis, which is about $7.5 million. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is costing Sinkis about $11 million. Even if we take half the 6 for Nevis, it will break the barrier of those figures immediately. So I can tell you in terms of cost that it will cost Nevis much more right now if we were to become independent tomorrow or next week. The cost for Sinkis will be greater in the sense that they'll not be able to share the cost with us any longer. And so the burden will be that greater on Kittitians and Kittitian taxpayers. That is what I can answer you by. In terms of you asking me, how do I know, or if you wish to know from me, which one will cost more, I cannot tell you. I simply am saying that we need to have information, we need to have figures, and you really won't get those figures from me because I don't have the money to do it.
That's the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, the Honorable Joseph Parry. We'll hear more from him and more from Premier Amory as we go on in the program. Now we go to the former Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Simeon Daniel. We will not be able to accommodate your calls as yet, so please don't start calling as yet. I'll tell you when we'll accommodate your call. Mr. Daniel, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good evening.
And we know that you were not 100% a couple of weeks or months ago, but we understand that you're coming around nicely. How's the feeling?
Well, much better, sir. Thanks very much.
And
I'd like to thank all those people who prayed for me when I was incapacitated and near to death's door, but I believe that I was revived for a purpose.
Okay.
And I'm making very good recovery, sir.
Okay, very well. Thank you very much. And this evening's discussion, as we've indicated, is looking at Nevis on the road to independence. You just heard the Premier, Mr. Amory, making his case for it. You just heard Mr. Parry, who is the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, the party which you co-founded, make some statements concerning it as well. What says you at this juncture?
Well, what I would say is that NRP, I'm certain, has betrayed the people of Nevis. The founding members of the Nevis Reformation Party fought with all their might to get Nevis where it is today. When we started, there was nothing. We had nothing to fight with. And we had to fight against powers that bear. There were guns, a defense force stationed in Nevis at the time. And in spite of all that, the people of Nevis rallied behind the NRP. And to reach so far now, for the new NRP to be saying that, Nevis cannot go it alone, Nevis cannot be independent, is a slap in the face for the hard work and the sacrifices that our fathers and forefathers and the old founders of the NRP have made. It's ungratefulness. But as I've said, and as the good book said, ungratefulness does not pay. And the sins of the fathers will visit the children and their children's children up to the third and the fourth generation. So when they're playing with people's freedom, people's lives, happiness of people, the independence of people, then they have to be prepared to make the consequences. People must remember we're enjoying a good standard of living today, but it was not always so. In 1980, you couldn't have a television in your home. It was against the law. It was after NRP and PAM formed the government that we repealed that law, and people were allowed to have a television in their home. A lot of young people forget this. Electricity was something that only the towns would get. We had to work on that and make sure that the whole island got electricity. Water, well, water was a problem. People had to go to the bay and take water from the ponds and go home and boil it to get water to drink in the old days. Roads were non-existent. The paved roads that we had, we understand that half the money went to lengthen Stinkits Airport and the other half came to Nevis to fix Nevis Road. We have come a long way. We have come a long, long way. And even though we were in there with PAM and a coalition government and we were supposed to be working together, I cannot forget that there were days when we were low on funds and the government in Stinkits had 80% owner of the bank. And I was the one who passed the resolution in the House of Assembly for the government to get 80% control of the bank. And when we sent down our checks, they were told we can't pay civil servants this month, or we can't pay this week, you must wait till next week. These are coming from our friends. These are coming from our partners. These are coming from people we helped to put into government. And this is the way they were treating us. So you want to tell me that we who have gone through all these things must still trust them? We must still trust them. A leopard does not change its skin. It may pretend. And what is happening right now is that Nevis, the population in Nevis, is being lured into a false sense of security. But when the time comes and they're ready to put pressure on us, they will say, you remember when you're trying to get away? You remember when you want to become independent? We must not forget. Because they don't forget. They do not forget. We must be like the people of Anguilla. When the Constitution was to be presented or to be applied in Stinkits, Nevis and Anguilla in 1967, the people of Anguilla said, no way, we will not go into statehood under that constitution. And they took up arms and they fought, they backed their talks with action. Mark you, they were helped by people in Stinkits who had their own axe to grind. But the people from Anguilla, they took up arms to defend their country. We haven't got to do that. We haven't got to do that. We hope we have never got to do that. Because we now have the opportunity to get our freedom, our independence, by the stroke of a pen. If we have come this far and we are turning back, and there are people who have benefited from the NRP and what the NRP has achieved, and they are now turning their backs on NRP and said, NRP is no good. NRP do not know what they're saying. Well, not NRP, the people of Nevis. Because NRP was the people of Nevis. And they're saying if Nevis cannot become independent after they have got their belly full out of Nevis, then I say this is ungratefulness. And they will pay for it. Maybe not right now, but they will pay for it. Because God's work is sure. It takes time, but it's sure.
Mr. Daniel, Mr. Daniel,
yes,
can I engage you? Just a couple of quick questions. You stated the dark days of Nevis, and now that Nevis has come a very long way. And you're making that as a case to continue moving forward, right?
That's right.
Yet the opponents of the independence movement use that very same argument not to move forward.
Yeah, well, if we don't move forward, we're going to move backward. There's nothing that is constant. You either go forward or you go backward.
But they're suggesting that the fact that you've reached this far, you have an airport and so on and so forth under this arrangement, is testimony that this arrangement is working.
Yeah, but that does not mean that you are independent. I mean, the federal government still has a lot of control over the airport. If tomorrow they said, the plane must stop running to Nevis, the plane will have to stop. If tomorrow they said, well, we're not going to allow telephone in Nevis, that will have to stop. If tomorrow they said, well, all customs, all goods coming into Nevis by air must be deposited in St. Kitts first, and then pay their duty there and come across to Nevis. All those things are possible. All those things are possible. What we are saying, become independent, get rid of all those possibilities and probabilities, and make sure that you have a certain status. We haven't got a certain status yet.
The man who took over the reins from you, the leadership from you, Mr. Parry, stated that maybe 20 years ago, when in 1970, or thereabout, or 30 years ago, maybe secession was a good idea. He doesn't think it is a good idea now. You say what?
What did Nevis have in 1970? And in 1970, he's justifying the cause of secession in 1970. What did Nevis have? It's not a question of money, it's a question of independence. It's a question of government. It's a question of the state of mind. It is true we have a lot more than we had in 1970. A lot more. But you are saying that the people in 1970 could have gone independent, but not the people in 2003. Even though your economy is so good. Because you see, you have to look at the logic of the argument. In 1970, secession was alright. But in 2003, when you have everything that your country needs for independence, you mustn't go. I don't know. Ivor Stevens used to say, God bless his soul, one of the founders, one of the warriors of the old NRP, that you cannot put a boy to do a man's job, because he must spoil it. He must mess it up. And his words, even though he's dead, the words have come to pass.
The fact that you think, therefore, that the current leadership of the Nevis Reformation Party is not carrying on the ideals and the aspirations of the party when you were at the helm?
It's obvious. It is very, very obvious. I always stood with my other colleagues when we found the Nevis Reformation Party. I've never changed, and I will not change. If we fail, we fail, but I will not change. I will not be the one to betray the aspiration and the hopes of the people of Nevis. I will not be the one to use the people money. They sell their goat, their egg, they sell their cattle to give us money to fight for independence for Nevis. I will not be the one to say that their effort was in vain. I will stand up to the last and fight for the independence of Nevis. Because Nevis can afford independence. Nevis can afford independence. We have legal advice. We can get legal advice. We can have associations and so on with other countries, so that all these big monies they're talking about, we don't need to have all that.
Mr. Daniel, what of the argument that in your day of the quest for independence for Nevis, or to break away from St. Kitts, was a different ideal in that you really wanted to be away from St. Kitts, but with Britain, and you did not really want to be independent?
No, when we started, we wanted to become a colony. For Britain to take us back as it took back Anguilla. Britain said no way. We were looking for accommodation so that we could get out of this power that St. Kitts had over us. We tried all over. We couldn't get anything. But then we realized that as we progress and as we develop and as we educate our people, we were in a position to move forward. Let's look at the federation is not a good thing. Federation is not a good thing. Let us look at the West Indies Federation. When the West Indies Federation was formed back in 1960, there were 10 countries involved in that federation. Jamaica, the opposition government in Jamaica went around on a jeep with a hog and 10 pigs and told the people of Jamaica, you see what federation is all about. Those 10 pigs going to suck this big hog. And what's going to happen? This big hog is going to become 4 and then it's going to die. He said those 10 pigs are the small islands that are in the federation. And the people of Jamaica voted to get out of the federation. So there were 9 left. And then Trinidad, which was the bigger country, when Trinidad was asked to lead the federation and carry it on, Dr. Williams at the time said 1 from 10 leaves not. And he said, we have to get out. Barbados was asked to carry on the federation. Barbados said, no, we're not going to carry on the federation. A few years ago, the Windward Islands, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, they had a meeting and they passed a resolution among themselves and said that they were going to form the Federation of the Windward Islands. But when they went back home, the people said, no way, we don't want a federation. We want to be on our own. Well, we want to be on our own too. Because when you look at our standard of living, compared with St. Vincent, Dominica, even certain parts of St. Lucia, Nevis is way ahead of them. Nevis is way ahead of them. And Nevis can afford to look after its own affairs better than most of these other countries.
Mr. Daniel, finally, you been the first Premier of Nevis, the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party. Obviously, there's still a number of folks who you would have known who've been in the struggle with. You have 30 seconds. What would you say finally to those people?
I will say, never give up. We are not where we started. We're not going to turn back. Let us go on and finish the task that we started back in 1970. Hold fast, and God is still with us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel, Simeon Daniel, the first Premier of Nevis, joining us there by phone. This is Talk That Gets Results, the heavyweight show, with Mark Brantley, Edric W. Stanley, Ted Hobson, and Alistair Yearwood. We'll bring them in just a second. We have on the line also Washington Archibald, who is a great social commentator here on Nevis and on St. Kitts, and indeed across the Caribbean, and he's not afraid to speak on any given issue. Mr. Archibald, not the first time you've been a part of this program. Good evening.
Good evening, Bill.
It's always good to hear from you on different social issues. How are you keeping?
I'm keeping fine. It was nice to hear my old friends here.
Okay. Now, in a couple of minutes, what's your take on this this discussion and the Nevis on the road to independence?
I believe, very frankly, apart from the fact that my mother is a Nevisian, and I always wish that she had conceived me and brought me forth in Nevis, I believe that Nevis should get the independence if they want it. We have always argued that. I mean, even in the days when Sim had just started the agitation, when everybody was against him, I have felt that it would make sense if the Nevisians were given what they said they wanted. I mean, as long as the majority of Nevisians feel as if they would like to survey the dark waters of independence, let them do it. I mean, to say nobody should stand in their way. And as I understand it, the Senkis government is no longer standing in the way of the divisions. And I don't believe Kittians as a whole would want to stand in the way of divisions. The only problem is that some misguided Kittians are developing some acrimony over the fact that divisions say they want to go. And you hear all kinds of funny and insulting remarks about this, but going into the independence is a noble thing. It is a noble act, and I don't see why anybody should want to put a stumbling block in the way of the divisions. I mean, as Sim rightly said, federation has been tried, it hasn't worked. Hasn't worked anywhere in the Caribbean because we have a legacy of insularity. We can't do anything about that, and I mean, it must not be left to St. Kitts and Nevis to cure this insularity fever. And if the divisions want to be on their own, of course let them be on their own. There's no money problem in it. It doesn't take money to be independent, politically independent. It takes a will. And if the people have the will to go out on their own and join CARICOM as a separate unit, so be it. Let them have their way.
Do you believe, Mr. Archibald, then, that Nevis can be independent, St. Kitts can be independent, and you continue to have good relations?
Well, of course. I wrote an article some months ago which says the boats will continue to sail. There is no way in which St. Kitts and Nevis could be both independent and be at war. They must get along together. The two islands must continue to get along together. Our parents are from Nevis, our relatives are from Nevis. We are going to be trading together. The thing is that the divisions are going to be carving out their own destiny. The Kittians are going to be doing the same. They could be doing it in a friendly way, in a mutually friendly way.
But then, yet, Mr. Archibald, those are the same arguments that the opponents of it use. The friendliness, the family ties, and so on will be disrupted.
No, it wouldn't be disrupted. I don't think it would. Why should it be disrupted? I mean, you take a little island like St. Martin, the size of Nevis, and you got people on the Dutch side and the French side getting along. You have relatives across the border. You don't even know where the border is. We have a border between St. Kitts and Nevis. But I mean, there are ties between the two islands which transcend everything else. And if the politicians want to do their own thing so that they are not constrained by the St. Kitts politicians, let the Nevis politicians carve their own destiny and do their own thing. Why not? Nevis was independent under St. Kitts one time. And when that independence was taken away and they were merged together, the divisions kicked and screamed. And they're doing it up to now. I mean, the situation has not changed. Divisions, when they are with Kittians, feel like second-class citizens.
When they did the non-binding referendum resulting in over 90%, and you obviously have followed the history of the independence for Nevis, even just reading it and so on, does it surprise you now that you're getting such opposition on Nevis, especially from the Nevis Reformation Party?
I believe that behind this thing with the Nevis Reformation Party, with the leaders, they're splitting hairs. They start, as we say down here, they're digging out holes. Because they can't be genuinely against what their party promoted in the first place. It was an underlying principle, a basic principle of the Nevis Reformation Party, that Nevis should secede from St. Kitts. I mean, that is why the NRP was started. That was the bedrock.
You don't buy the argument that it might have started that way, but circumstances and things have changed?
But what circumstances could change it? The only circumstance that could change it is that the Nevis Reformation Party leaders are not in office. But I am quite sure that if they were in office, they would want to be independent of St. Kitts.
Mr. Archibald, thank you very much. We hope that you keep listening, and we'll perhaps get in touch with you a little later on.
All right. Okay, I'll
This is the Heavyweight Show, special edition of the Let's Talk program. You just heard from Washington Archibald. Earlier, we heard comments from the Honorable Simeon Daniel, who is the first Premier of Nevis and the former leader of the Nevis Reformation Party. We heard recorded comments from the Honorable Joseph Parry, the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, and the first of the Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Vince Amory. Gentlemen, good evening. We're going to do it this way. Let's start first. We've heard all of the inputs by the previous speakers. Let's start with Mr. Yearwood. Mr. Yearwood, any comments?
Good evening, Weber. Good evening to the listening audience. As usual, it's an honor to be asked onto this program. It's interesting, the debate that is going on over this issue. Those who seem to be in favor of Nevis becoming independent can see no possible negative impact of independence for Nevis. And those who seem to be against the idea of Nevis becoming independent can see no possible positive impact of Nevis becoming independent. And that to me is complete foolishness. I believe those people are either misleading or have been misled, because there's no situation that is all positive or all negative. To my mind, we should be, I've said it before in this program, we should be looking at the impacts on people who live in Nevis. Is life going to be more convenient, easier, more bountiful if Nevis is independent, or is it going to be more convenient, easier, more bountiful if we stay as part of a federation? The concept that federations do not work, I find extraordinary, because from both of the Dr. Daniel and Mr. Archibald who just spoke, if you consider that in one breath they're saying that in St. Kitts and Nevis we're enjoying an excellent standard of living in comparison to most of our OECS cousins. We have achieved that while being part of a federation. I hope that if we become independent islands of each other, we don't become like St. Vincent, who is an independent country and has not managed to achieve the standard of living that we have achieved. Federation no good? Well then why is the USA a federation and without any doubt the most strongest and powerful economically and militarily country in the whole wide world? The other concept that the founding concepts of a political party should be there ad infinitum, I don't accept that. I can't think of any political party anywhere in the world that has not changed its position on all sorts of issues since 1980, let alone 1920. The obvious ones are because of the influence of the British on us in the past would be the Labour Party in England. It bears no resemblance to the Labour Party of the 70s or the 80s. So why then are we surprised when political parties change their position on issues in our own country? Are we supposed to stay stagnant with one concept forever? I can't accept that. I believe we're far too intelligent, and situations change, minds change, personnel change, and therefore it affects the views and the position of political parties, and I think that is correct and good.
Mr. Hobson, good evening.
Weber, good evening, and good evening to all the people of Nevis and people of St. Kitts and all those who are listening to us in the region, and people who are in touch with us through the internet and so forth. Well, this evening really is a magnificent evening. Within the last 40 minutes, half an hour, the whole discussion on independence has been dramatized before our very eyes. Mr. Daniel, it was great to hear his discourse on the question, the history of this movement towards independence. It was good to hear the Premier, and we also had the present leader of the opposition, Mr. Parry.
I want to take an issue with Mr. Parry. Mr. Parry started off his discourse at the annual dinner of the Chamber of Commerce in St. Kitts by talking about autonomy has nothing to do with independence. Well, that is the strangest thing that I've ever heard. In any discussion of independence, you talk about whether your country has full autonomy or not. Mr. Parry came out very early in February at a meeting of the legislatures in both the St. Kitts and Nevis legislature, and he's made it absolutely clear that the NRP is supporting full autonomy for the island of Nevis. And full autonomy is full autonomy. It means absolutely in charge of all your affairs, your internal affairs and your external affairs. Now he has been cut with that, and he's trying to qualify what autonomy means. I think when I came in, there was something on my desk here, in which taken from Collins' dictionary, and the definition of autonomy, it says the right or state of self-government, freedom to determine one's own actions and behavior. It has always been known in constitutional circles that full autonomy means independence.
But in fairness, Mr. Hobson, he contrasts that with secession, though, right?
Well, the question, he spoke about independence. He didn't talk about secession at all.
Didn't he suggest we should have that comment, right? That he made. We'll try and get that in for you.
I'm almost certain he said independence.
But can we go to it? We'll try and go to it. But my take was that he was suggesting while he is in favor of full autonomy, he was opposed to secession. Do we have it?
Use full autonomy so loosely. Independence is independence and autonomy is autonomy. Autonomy and independence can never be the same thing. The English language is very precise in terms of words and their meanings and so on. So Prince Amri is not talking about full autonomy. That is why you're being confused.
Okay.
However, it's Mr. Parry who is being confused. Full autonomy means independence. You look at any constitutional document and study what autonomy means.
Okay.
And full autonomy. He's not even saying limited autonomy. He's saying full. You can't be full. If you're full, you can't be more full. Full autonomy. If you have a full cup of water is full. You can't go over that.
Okay, we're going to get back to you, Mr. Hobson. Mr. Brantley, I'm not going to allow you to follow the same pattern. We're going to just keep the flow of the discussion. Take up from there. Are you agreeing with the... Are we dealing with syntax here?
Well, I must confess, Weber, that I myself am very puzzled at the suggestion that the NRP can be committed to full autonomy for Nevis, but be against independence for Nevis. And I don't think that the Nevisians are very literate, sensible, and articulate people. And I don't want anybody out there in radio or TV land to say, Mark Brantley says so. Go to your dictionary. All of you out there, I know you have children in school, the kids in high school, whatever, go to your dictionary. Look up the word autonomy and look up the word independence. And while you're at it, look up the word full. And see if you can detect a difference between full autonomy in the context of a country or a people and independence. And if you can, I'm sure Weber will open the lines in due course. Please call in and educate me, because I can't understand it. Regrettably, Weber, what we're seeing here is that Mr. Parry committed the NRP in a communique on February 18th to this notion of full autonomy for Nevis. And I believe that because of the solemn type of occasion, a joint meeting of cabinets, all the political parties, if you will, I think with the exception perhaps of PAM, but everybody who was represented at the federal parliament meeting and issuing a joint communique, that it appears he feels incapable of resigning from that position. And so what he has now sought to do is some smoke and mirrors, sleight of hand, and say, well, full autonomy is not the same thing as independence. And if Mr. Parry is listening, and I know he listens often, good evening, Mr. Parry, I would hope that when the lines open, you yourself might call him. And please, I'm saying this earnestly, I would love for you to explain to me the distinction, because it is bringing a lot of confusion to my mind as to how you can be committed to full autonomy for the people of Nevis, but at the same time and in the same breath be against independence for the people of Nevis.
Edric, good evening. You got any thoughts on that?
Good evening, Webo. When I first heard the statement, although I didn't really want to get into this type of debate and I don't want to be a referee, I thought that the statement was really not coherent with reference to secession and independence. But I must say categorically, there is no difference between full autonomy and independence.
Okay,
But
if there's no difference...
Politicians are astute enough to use what is known as play on words with the hope that somewhere along the line they might be able to extricate themselves from these play on words. And I'm hoping that Mr. Parry would come full circle and say flatly, I am against secession, and abandon the idea of full autonomy.
That's exactly what I was going to get at.
Meaning, let me finish, Webber. Meaning that he would have taken up a profound position with reference to an issue of this magnitude, and hence the matter of full autonomy would be laid to rest once and for all. But let me backtrack a little with reference to the history of Nevis and the insertion of that nuclear weapon 113, which Mr. Daniel inserted in the Constitution. It is something that can get us somewhere, can be used to get us where we want to go up to a certain point, but the trigger must never be pulled. We recognize that Mr. Daniel has participated in the past in St. Kitts. He was given a certain amount of authority and positions. It did not work to his advantage at that point in time. And as the opportunity arose, he crafted this nuclear weaponry, 113, inserted into the Constitution, and he refused to use it. He had a full term, more than one full term, to use it. He never did. Wisely, I must say. He never did. Our current premier has recognized that loaded gun and has decided that he's going to use it. We have gotten a lot out of the federal government, far more than the former administration received from the federal government. And I'm saying at this juncture, we should truly understand where we are. Nevis has done very well in the past if we track its history. It faltered, not failed, but it faltered and lost the control of Antigua, Montserrat, and St. Kitts. And as it meanders along the path of its history, we came upon the 1940s, 1950s.
I got to, let me just take a little break. Let me ask this question very quickly, and then I'm going to open up the lines. You're suggesting, therefore, you're suggesting Section 113 is in the Constitution, which affords Nevis to take its independence, but it should never be used.
It should never be used because of fragmentation. And I just wanted to make a few more.
You'll be here all night, Edric, so you'll get a chance to make the point. Our numbers are 869-469-1616 and or 1700. Nevis on the road to its independence. Give us a call and tell us what your views are. Mac A.G. Brantley, Edric W. Stanley, Ted Hobson, and Alistair Yearwood. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. I want to be the first to call in. I'm very confused to hear the former Premier of Davis making such a noise and fuss about secession. He was there for 12 years. He never called for secession. As a matter of fact, I will go on to say he was rejected and he's still rejected. I don't think anybody in Davis is listening to him. He's different.
Can I ask you a question, caller?
Yes.
You're in Nevis?
I'm in Nevis.
You were listening?
I listened.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't think you know what he's saying. I really don't think you know what he's saying. My thing is that once you're intoxicated, you shouldn't come on radio to make yourself a poppy show. And that's exactly what he did tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 869-469-161-601-700. Gentlemen, the bill has been tabled in the House. The campaigns are going on. And I'd like your thoughts on where you think things are at this juncture. Let me go through this call. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Good evening. You're on the air. Good evening. You're on the air. Okay. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Herbert and panel. I listened to Mr. Stanley tonight, right? And I was surprised with Mr. Stanley's comments, right? And the person just stand there talking about Mr. Daniel. He's gonna be surprised with, because everybody knows that Mr. Daniel Lizard had the support in his party to support him and he pressed for independence. Everybody knows that. There was some wood lights inside there. You understand, who were eating out on Mr. Daniel. So how can he achieve independence with wood lights in there with him? He couldn't. He couldn't. You understand? When you had wood lights in there eating him out, how can Mr. Daniel achieve independence? And, you know, by hearing Mr. Stanley and the first father, I mean, it gets me irritated. You understand? And I don't really want to go further with it.
Okay.
Tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hello, good evening, Weber.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused about something here, right? I want to know if Mr. Perry is the only one in Nevis who knows what full autonomy means. Because, I mean, the way I get it, that he saying that he wants full autonomy, but not secession. Could we get full autonomy without secession?
Let's go to one of our scholars. Mr. Brantley, can you handle that?
Well, that kind of scholarship is beyond me, Weber. Because that is why I'm asking the public, please, to ring in and seek to educate me, because I don't understand what Mr. Perry is saying.
As far as, do you think, what do you think someone would do that then?
Well, Weber, it's quite clear that, as my friend Mark said, that in the sanctity of a meeting with all of the legislatures in St. Kitts, he made that statement. Not only made that statement, but he went further. He was part of the communique. He contributed to communique which says that the Nevis Reformation Party prefer not to take part in another federal election. So it really came together what he meant.
Okay.
There must be independence, full autonomy.
But I think it was Mr. Yearwood who pointed out there was nothing wrong in changing their mind. What if he changed his mind?
No, Rebel, but that I think, because I agree 100%. I know this will surprise my friend Alistair. I agree 100% with him. That a party, one individual, can change their mind.
Okay, so what if he argues he has changed his mind?
But he has not argued that. You see, that is the difficulty that Mr. Perry finds himself in. If Mr. Perry came to the public and said, when I said full autonomy for Nevis, I made an error, and having come back and spoken to my party and my executive, I am now changing my mind, then fine. But he's not saying that. He's coming and trying to bamboozle us by telling us that there's a difference between full autonomy, which he committed to, and independence, which we're arguing about.
Weber?
Yes.
Well, okay, you know Mr. Perry was a teacher in school, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, you know Mr. Perry been saying all along, NRP been formed on the basis of secession at all costs for Nevis. Well, I mean, what's the idea now? I mean, now that you're, like Mr. Daniel was saying, now that you have an opportunity to do it without guns, without anything else.
Yeah, I think, to your question, I think Mr. Yearwood offered an explanation. In 1970, the NRP might have been founded with that ideology. What they're saying now in 2003, it has changed.
Oh, I see.
Okay?
All right then.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening.
Thank you for holding.
Thank you. I'm back here, Tim Daniel. No, I heard Mr. Stanley say that NRP was in power all these years and he never used Section 113. Now, I think after 12 years, I can say that in 1990 at Pennis Beach, the NRP constituency representatives met, and the question of secession was put by my constituency, St. John's, about moving to put the resolution for the session in the House. When we put it to the vote, Mr. Parry did not vote for it. Mr. Griffin did not vote. I voted for it, and Mr. Martin voted for it. Ivor Stevens was out of office at the time. So there were only 4 votes of NRP in the House. 2 against, 2 for. So it was no point to put it in the House because I did not want to embarrass myself putting a resolution in the House and then find it being knocked down by members of my own party. So it must not be said that it was not thought about. It was thought about, but it did not pass the party constituency meeting.
Well, Mr. Daniel, therefore, isn't it reasonable to conclude that Mr. Parry's position now should not surprise you then?
Well, but he still continued. He wanted to lead the party.
But you always knew, Mr. Daniel, therefore, that he was not in favor of an independent Nevis, based on that vote.
Well, he did not support it, but you know he was a big wig in St. Kitts at the time, with the government in St. Kitts at the time. Actually, one founding member of NRP walked out with his members and said he was going home to phone the Prime Minister to let them know we hope you're talking about secession. So you see, this is where our problem stands. You send a Nevis politician to St. Kitts, and soon they are befriended by the St. Kitts politicians, and they forget Nevis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Yes, go ahead.
Let me say this, Weber, because I think it's important that it be said. I think Mr. Yarwood suggested earlier that it is okay. Indeed, it is expected that people, parties, positions will change over time. And I applaud Mr. Yarwood for saying that, because it seems that in Nevis, in our political discussion, there is a certain inability of people to come in a forthright manner to the public and say, look, while I might have been for that then, I am not for that now. And so I have argued from a long time ago that the best thing that the Nevis Reformation Party could have done for themselves, and indeed for their supporters, and ultimately for the people of Nevis, is for them to come out and articulate a clear, sensible position in relation to independence for Nevis. Instead of doing so, they have gone down this road. I attended one of the town hall meetings, and I think it was the chairman of the NRP, Mr. Liebert, Mr. Herman Liebert, who spoke at length about we're neither saying to vote yes, nor are we saying to vote no. We are merely educating people. And for people who are looking to be in government and are saying to the Nevisian electorate that we wish to lead you, then people are legitimately asking, what leadership are you providing? What exactly are you saying to us on this fundamental issue? And I think that therein lies the problem, and I think that that strategy, if I can call it that, is what now is impacting Mr. Parry and is forcing him into all kinds of contortions when he seeks to say, on the one hand this is the position, but on the other hand this is the position. I believe that it is clear to every right-thinking division that the NRP, the present NRP, the new NRP, is against independence for Nevis, because all the education that they say that they are providing, I have not heard them articulate a single positive about independence for Nevis. It's all the negatives, all the bad things are going to happen if we become independent. And I believe that there ought to be man enough and women enough to come out and say, we are against this thing, and these are the reasons why we are against it. And furthermore, this is what we propose as an alternative.
But the CCM propose everything that is good, right?
Well, but in fairness to the Nevis Island administration, nobody has to light a candle to look for them. We know where they stand because they've come out in a forthright manner and say there are political problems between St. Kitts and Nevis, political problems which some argue have gone back over 100 years, and this is what we propose. We propose to use this mechanism, nuclear weapon, my friend Stanley calls it, but this mechanism given to us by Simeon Daniel and the NRP. We propose to use it in a peaceful exercise of our constitutional right to solve the political dilemma that plagues St. Kitts and Nevis.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening. Along the highlight of the point, please. Something contradictory about the issue, the way you are agitating the issue of secession. But first, I would like to say, the reason why Mr. Joseph Perry, leader opposition, made a statement, because the previous campaign of independence for Nevis, the present panel, they said that we are only separating the government, which Mr. was contradictory. I found out that we are getting a little more transparency. Now, in 1970, the state of economy of Nevis was not prepared for full autonomy because there weren't any resources as such. No reliable water supply, electricity, and telecommunication service. In response to Mr. Simeon Daniel's comment, I just want to be objective. Things that Nevis have come quite a long way successfully together, building our economy and nation. It is because we are together, considering the population of Nevis, we're able to obtain a loan very easily. And so I don't think that anyone should be disregarding us being a federation. What you all need to agitate is that Nevis is growing autonomy, growing economy, can still see from Singit with the constitutional rights one fleet. So the NRP is supporting the resolution. They came and read it and they said it. So I don't think you all should be lashing out and saying that they're against it. They have said it. And I think that we should not be blaming the NRP if the referendum fails. We should blame the people of Nevis, because people of Nevis should know what they want. So thank you very much.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to go back to the lines, but quickly. That statement that the gentleman made, pretty interesting. If the referendum failed, blame the people of Nevis, because the people of Nevis should know what they want. If you're going into independent, isn't that correct? You should really know what you want? Quickly, Mr. Yearwood.
Well, actually, I disagree with the statement. I feel that whether a referendum succeeds or fails, I don't think anybody should be blamed, because each individual has the right to make up their mind on the issue and vote accordingly. And I don't see why blame should be apportioned to anybody.
Mr. Hobson?
Well, we have a very strong party system in this country. And we saw what happened in 1998 in the referendum that we had. And it was quite clear that one of the reasons why it failed was because the NRP went up there and opposed it. In fact, in the parish of St. Thomas's, you had the same kind of support, same kind of vote against the referendum as you normally have in supporting their candidate, the NRP.
But Mr. Hobson, what the caller seemed to be suggesting, isn't there any issue that a people can determine on their own, irrespective of what a political party suggests to them? In other words, can a person not on a particular issue vote without party lines?
They can, and that's what we have been trying to do. We have been trying to educate the people that this is not a party political issue. This is an issue for all Nevisians.
Mr. Brantley.
Well, I think that some of the people will vote based on their own reasoned analysis. Many others, regrettably, will vote the way they perceive their party wants them to vote. And that is the harsh reality of
politics in this Twin Island Federation.
Mr. Stanley.
Based on what I understand and based on what I have acknowledged over a period of time, there is a certain percentile amount of the people, voting people in Nevis, have categorically decided that they're not going to vote for it based on the information they have available. One, the economy of Nevis is not fully agitated and fueled up or fired up.
No, the point I'm trying to get, Edric, is whether or not we think that people should be at a level where on any issue they can determine, as they've been talking about education, and make the analysis themselves.
It is predicated on the amount of information that an individual has. And based on that, people will make their decisions accordingly.
You think so?
No, not totally. Because we all are here and we know who control the most influence within Nevis. And individually, we are attempting to have our point of view thrust upon others based on the way we see things.
Isn't it an ideal situation if a people, irrespective of whether it be independence or just an issue, can be able to analyze it and make reasoned judgments on their own?
Not necessarily.
No, it's not a good idea?
Well, it's a good idea for people to...
Oh, well, that's what I'm asking. If it's not an ideal situation that the people should work towards that.
People should work toward that.
Okay.
Also, the information must be made available to help them to work toward that.
Good evening. Thank you for holding. Good evening. You're on the air. Good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, Mr. Robert.
Good evening. Hello. Could you turn your radio down, please? Yes. Could you turn it down?
Okay.
Thank you.
When Mr. Parry, when you had 116 class, when Mr. Parry was? Hello?
You're asking me a question, sir?
Yeah, when 116 class was introduced to the institution, right? Where Mr. Parry was? He was in the NRP thing? He was there?
No, he was a civil servant at the time. He was Mr. Daniel's permanent secretary.
But he wasn't a part of that?
Well, he was, in the sense that he was a supporter of the Nevis Reformation Party, but he was in fact the permanent secretary of Mr. Daniel, who was then Minister of Nevis Affairs.
He didn't vote for put nothing into the class that...
No, he would not have been in a position, no.
But I think then Mr. Parry cannot talk with the people. Mr. Parry is supposed to, as far as me look at it, Parry is an obstacle to me. Well, very much is an obstacle. He should be history. He shouldn't be. I don't know what people got him around. He shouldn't. I don't know why. Parry, to me, Parry is supposed to be history. Long gone is HISTORY. So because he's just an obstacle in the whole. Everybody in Nevis a part of it.
We call it. Can use another word for it, right? We can call it democracy as well. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Could you speak a little louder, please?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm just calling to say I'm agree with Dr. Simeon Daniels with what's saying, because last week I was in the same argument. I'm glad that you all bring up the same topic. Because an old lady walk up to me and say, young man, how you feel about independence? I laugh. Start to say, they're going independent, they not got nothing. I say, I feel just like how the British government feels. If you remember that it's a religion, don't know what we want, and it sounds like time to Mr. Parry them to stop play children house, like when we were small we playing house, dolly house, and come out playing and talk to the people. Good, cause I can't see, and the next thing what really putting me off again, I say if something done already signed, cause if the Prime Minister running for his seat and he win by one seat, and he will become the Prime Minister then? He just win by one vote?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, so I see that is nonsense when they say about to go back and vote. I think the thing already done signed. I think they just putting us, make us get confused. Because enough the people then saying ain't going to think every minute voting. But I tell them that it's time to we individuals put ourselves together and stop act as little nigga play children house. It's time to we get together and go and make put what we say we want. From since everyone the party in Nevis win, they go into secession. I could remember with Mr. Walwyn, is the same technique he come in with, and when he done Mr. the liar, the Fred Paris, he come and use it and he'll go over and think it and let them buy him over. Because when Walwyn come and talk to us and tell us we going England to this and that, when he come back, the Labour thing, Mr. Bradshaw gave him Attorney General. And I don't know why they want to go down there and lay things. So Parry go down there and they're trying to fool Parry, put all kind of nonsense in the Parry head, and Parry coming to try to make Navy John head. I think it's time to pull our head together.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hello, good evening.
Yes. Could you turn your radio or television down, please? Yeah. Could you turn? Well. Yes, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Hello, good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
Yes, we're speaking tonight with some very important and heartfelt issue. Mr. Daniel, good evening. Glad to hear you back on the foot and around and about. You said ungratefulness. Please take a good look at yourself. What's your own village in Barnsgrove? What you have done for Barnsgrove? Some of the young kids don't even know you. You should be around Barnsgrove even if you're not working. Let them know you to start this NRP Foundation. As you said, I think all the kids in Barnsgrove know Mr. Parry. You could go to Mr. Parry at any time and any place. Mr. Amri, he have done well for Gingerland. Big community centers that when I sit on my head rise, Barnsgrove Road is in an awful mess. I don't think no politician and nobody who is out of Barnsgrove want to come to Barnsgrove. Remember, we pay this tax money here in Barnsgrove too. So I think that we're supposed to get full due like any other place. God bless these people that sponsor children for education as CDC and Social Security and cable telephone. Some of you big politicians who have money, what you have done for the kids? What you all have done for the kids? Sponsor some of these kids. Barnsgrove have very bright kids. I supposed to be here. One of these kids sponsored by one of you all. Even Mr. Daniel, please. So, don't be so hard on Mr. Parry. If he says he wants a session, as he cannot change nobody's mind, he can talk, he cannot carry us to the poll and say, hold our hand and vote. We make up our own mind. As one of you says, this is not a political issue. This is what we want to do and where we are going from Nevis, what we want to do, what we want to do, not even for us, for our grandchildren, for the children that's coming down the road. So we have to make up our own mind and make God do the rest for all of us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Good evening. You're on the air. Hello. Hello.
Yes, I'm calling in concerning the show there.
Yes.
And people have to realize it's not about the people, it's about the politician. And again, concerning Mr. Parry and Mr. Amri, the competition will be there, and Mr. Parry still want to be the first Prime Minister of Nevis. It's not about the people of Nevis. It's not about what's going on in Nevis. It's about who is going to be the first Prime Minister. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Quickly again, gentlemen.
Yeah,
that's it. How's that issue?
I can't speak to the rivalry. I've heard much said about it between Mr. Parry and Mr. Amri. I myself have great respect for both men, and I would hope that the politics that we see played out in Nevis has nothing to do with a petty rivalry. Let me, however, speak to what this lady so passionately spoke to about in Barnsgrove. I would like to say that I agree with her 100% in relation to the apparent neglect that that area appears to have experienced. And one only has to drive up Jessop's and into Barnesgood to see that the rest of the island, the other parishes and the other villages in the island have generally speaking, outpaced that area, that pocket in St. Thomas's. And I don't know why, because the neglect isn't only under this administration. It appears that the neglect was indeed under the previous administration as well. And it has continued over the years. And I share this caller's view that all of us in Nevis are taxpayers, and all of us contribute to the public purse. And we shouldn't see, because perhaps St. Thomas's is an opposition area now, that they are perhaps neglected. But I can't even use that argument, because as I said, they were neglected even back when their party, if you will, the party that they usually vote for, is in power. But
we're talking politics-wise, Mr. Bentley. Maybe how about if they do this? Be an area that you can call before the votes are counted, and then perhaps they will get some attention.
Well, perhaps, Weber, it's analogous, I suppose, to the situation in America. They say the black vote always goes to the Democrats, so the Democrats don't feel a need to do anything for black people. So that is probably an accurate argument. And because the people of St. Thomas's, everybody knows how they tend to vote, perhaps that's the argument, that the party they vote for doesn't feel a need to do anything for them, because they'll vote for NRP anyway. And the opposition the other party feels, I shouldn't do anything for you because I know you're going to vote NRP. But I think that those kinds of arguments you can continue, but at the end of the day, we're talking about people. We're talking about divisions.
And one nation.
Communities such as Jessop's and Barnesgood have contributed intellectual heavyweights, fishermen, cricketers. They have contributed immensely to the growth and development of Nevis. And I think it's a very, very sad thing when you drive through those villages to see the disrepair and the neglect that they have experienced under successive administrations. Because I'm not going to single out the NRP, now will I single out the CCM. Under successive administrations, both NRP and CCM have neglected St. Thomas.
Okay.
Actually,
go ahead, Mr.
In defense of Dr. Daniel, when he was in power, one must realize that money was not available for road projects, and in fact many of the roads through villages were built just simply two concrete strips. That is what the government could afford. Okay, and the improvement of roads in the off main roads has all basically happened during the CCM administration as funds have become more available. So I think it's an unfair criticism of Mr. Daniel to say that he ignored that area.
But at the same time, I don't know whether or not the NRP would agree with that most of the development of roads took place under the other administration. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Weber, and good evening to your panel. I would like to take the discussion away from the political parties and from Mr. Daniel, Mr. Parry, because on referendum day we're not going to be voting for Mr. Armory and Mr. Parry. My issue here is that what I would like to see the authorities in Nevis and your learned panel discuss issues such as whether we as Nevisians, and here when I'm saying we as Nevisians, I'm talking about Nevisians who will be living in Nevis after the secession, should we vote yes for secession simply because it was included in the Constitution and it's our constitutional right, or should we vote yes to secession because after secession the way of living is going to be better for Nevisians, our standard of living, as Mr. Yearwood mentioned earlier, is going to be higher, or it's going to maintain the same level as it is after secession, when we have now to incur these additional expenses of national security, foreign affairs, regional international contributions to the IMF, World Bank. Are we going to have to incur additional taxes, us as Nevisians?
Caller, in trying to address that same situation, might I ask you a question?
Sure.
Were you around when St. Kitts and Nevis became independent?
Yes.
Were you satisfied that all those answers were given?
I can't recall if all those answers were given or if all those questions were even asked.
But nevertheless, they went into the independence.
Are you saying that we?
No,
are
I'm
in that
just
age
no. What I'm doing, caller, I'm asking questions. I'm not making any conclusions. I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, and I know we are now going into secession and breaking up the federation. And I, as an division, these are the sort of issues I would like to hear addressed if I am supposed to, on that day, vote yes for secession.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening. Yes, I would like to ask pose a question. Can I go ahead?
You would like to
pose the question to the panel?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. One of the questions that I would like to ask is, like to say, what I like to say that we could see clearly that Mr. Parry, in the first time when Mr. Daniel came up with the idea of moving the process forward in session, he voted against it. Then he come back now the second time now and said he prefer greater autonomy for the island of Nevis. It appears to me that Mr. Parry is confused, and he's also taking the people down the road with him of being confused himself. So it appears to me that now that if he is not ready to lead the party who was formed on the basis of secession at all costs to lead it, I think it's time for him to step aside and allow someone else to carry on the dream of the party, something that is close to the heart of Nibijan. If we fail to take session now, the people of the Caribbean and the world at large will have us as a laughing stock just because of someone who's standing in the way of the people achieving independence.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Hello? Maybe that's not for us. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Hello. Good evening.
Hello?
Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a question I would like to ask.
Could you speak a little louder?
The question I would like to ask, just like the NRP is giving trouble now the CCM is in office. Suppose it comes a time that the NRP was to be in power and the CCM at the same way. What then?
What then? Good question. What then, Mr. Hobson?
Well, in 1997, when the issue of the referendum and the triggering of 113 first came about, the NRP indicated that they would support the referendum if the Nevis Island administration brought forward the election that was not due until 1998. And we, during that campaign, is this Concerned Citizens Movement, to a man, every one of us went on the platform and indicated that if in this election the NRP were to win, we would support the NRP going forward to independence.
But we would have never known whether or not you would have carried it out because...
But we made it absolutely clear to the public.
But on the other hand, the other party made it absolutely clear they were going to do. And they changed their mind, and we just established that it's okay to change your mind, right?
Well, I mean, they got us to call the election early because on the promise that if we did, they will support. But we all made it clear, because the issue of independence for Nevis is not an issue for politics. And the sooner this matter is resolved, the better it is for the NRP as well.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. Well, I would like to just say that I really think the whole issue is not about the Parry or the armory or politics. I think going into independence, full autonomy for Nevis, I think each and every one of us here in Nevis should really think on what we really want. So just look around us and ask ourselves, are we far enough? Are we well equipped to go into independence? And then do it. And not wait on the politicians to tell us whether we should go or whether we should stay. I mean, the politicians themselves don't even know what full autonomy means. I mean, how can we look at them?
Okay.
Can't we just look around and make our own decision?
That's an interesting one. Let me get a comment from around the table on that. The politicians some people are suggesting, seemingly as confused or confusing the issues, the people should analyze it themselves. Let's go. Let's go first. Mr. Yearwood.
Well, Baba, on the issue of that, I'm not confused by the position of the political parties. It's from my understanding, and maybe it's just my brain. You gave us something here. The definition for autonomy has been read out. Autonomy, the right or state of self-government, freedom to determine one's own actions and behavior. This is from the Collins Dictionary. Independent, it has a different definition. Free from the influence or control of others, not dependent on anything else for function or validity. Separate, not relying on the support, especially financial support, to others. Capable of acting on oneself or on one's own. So there is a slight difference. But apart from that, my understanding is my understanding is very simple. I see we have 4 political parties in the Federation of St. Kitts Nevis. The Labour Party has basically come out and said that they do not believe that secession is the best way forward. The People's Action Movement has said exactly the same thing, and they believe that the NRP have now also done so. If they haven't said it in so many words as Mr. Brandt he would like to, I think they have said enough to let us draw our own conclusions. And the Nevis Island administration has absolutely, again, I agree with Mr. Brantley, they've come out categorically and stated their case, and I find that definite statement refreshing. Now, with regard to people making...
Mr. Just before you go, you're suggesting that you are of the view, the conclusion that the Nevis Reformation Party is not in support of independence in Nevis?
That has to be my understanding from what has been said and what has been printed.
So if they were to tell you something else different, you will be surprised?
No, I would have to change my view.
Okay, Mr. Hobson. Quickly, I was looking at the point of what the person said. Perhaps maybe people should now look at things and analyze themselves and vote.
Well, you're not going to get that, Webo.
You're not Mr. Brantley, we think we can achieve that?
Webo, regrettably, I go back to what I said earlier, that some of us will, too many, in my view, for an educated people, will do exactly as they feel their party wants them to do.
Okay, Mr. Stanley, where are we at with that?
People are going to vote their minds, and they're going to the rest going to vote based on the influence that has been exerted on them.
The majority will vote that way, based on what the political people tell them?
That is how the die has been cast. That's the way the die has been cast.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Weber. I'd just like to throw a question to the panelists. In the event we go in a federal status, where Nevis has its own government, St. Kitts has its own government, and we have a federal government, I'm asking if there are people who say that Nevis cannot carry itself financially, wouldn't it be more expensive to carry itself and still be part of a federal system? So they would have to maybe have to pay half of it.
Well, let me say that I think that this caller is spot on. That this is one of the recommendations I think coming out of the Fred Phillips report, that we somehow ought to have a government for St. Kitts, a government for Nevis, and a federal structure on top. So we're now going to have 3 governments. And there are many who are saying Nevis cannot survive, Nevis cannot make it financially, but yet they're advocating that position. And the caller is exactly correct, that Nevis will now have to pay for its own government and contribute to the maintenance of a federal government which sits atop the governments of St. Kitts and the government of Nevis. The other thing that I would say, and it's an argument that I've made time and time again, that in order to achieve that kind of mechanism, the only way that I know of that we can do so is by way of constitutional reform. And the reforms that would necessitate, that would require under the Constitution 2 referenda. One in St. Kitts, where 2/3 of the people of St. Kitts must agree, and a separate referendum in Nevis where the 2/3 of the people in Nevis must agree. Now, if there are people out there who feel that PAM and Labour in St. Kitts are going to agree on a reform put forward by one or the other, 2/3 of the people, because the way that the votes are split in this federation, the political parties must all be on board, in my view, in order for us to achieve that 2/3 vote. So, if in St. Kitts we feel that PAM and Labour will agree, and then we feel in Nevis, CCM and NRP will agree, then and only then can we realistically talk about constitutional reform.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening.
Yes, you're on the air.
Yeah, my name is Mr. Igwe. I would like to ask the panel a curious question. And the question is, has there ever been a precedent, or has there ever been a case in recent or past history where independence for a country has been obtained by a referendum of the electorate? And if the answer is no, then I think Nevis should get the independence from St. Kitts through the normal procedure.
Caller, what do you mean the normal procedure?
Well, the first question is, has Nevis, has any country in the world ever obtained independence through a referendum of the electorate? That's the question to the panel.
The question is, the answer probably reasonably is no, because just a second, because my question to you is, do you know of any other country in the world which has that provision in the constitution that they can take the referendum by that means?
So maybe we should follow it.
No, I'm asking you if you know of any.
I am not aware.
Oh, you're not aware?
No.
Okay. So you're suggesting therefore that Nevis should not follow
the procedure of other countries, how they obtain their independence.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, caller, what I'm saying, if the constitution sets out a particular path, you're saying that maybe what we should do is denounce that and follow what other people does?
Correct.
Okay, that's interesting.
Instead of standing
that's interesting.
Whether the caller has a point. I mean, every country in the Caribbean moved to independence on the wishes of the party in power. And they didn't have a referendum.
Yeah, but Mr. Hobson, the point is though, that at the time, that provision or that procedure was not there.
I agree. But the caller should be aware that there was a country that became independent not too long ago, last year I think, through a referendum, and that is East Timor. But unfortunately, those who failed in the referendum turned around and killed over 2,000 to 3,000 people of those who supported. So it's not a very good example. It's not a very good example.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening. Well, I would just like to say good evening to the panelists. I have a very burning issue. Nibichans in St. Kitts. Now here is where we are deciding the fate of our country. Yet still Nibichans in St. Kitts have no input. We Nibichans in St. Kitts, we support our families in Nevis. We come over occasionally, but yet still we are not involved in this whole situation. How come that the Guyanese and the Santo Domingans?
Okay, caller, here's how very quickly that I think that you can get involved.
Yeah.
You live in St. Kitts?
Yeah.
Do you know you have an option that you can register or live in Nevis and vote?
Yeah, but tell me something. Having been registered in St. Kitts, isn't that I now have to remove my name from the voters list?
But you live in St. Kitts, sir, so you vote and register in St. Kitts.
Yes, you'll have to do that. It's just that a matter, for instance, Mr. Brantley, if he wants to vote in St. Kitts.
You gotta go and live in St. Kitts and vote down there. You are thrown in your lot with the people of St. Kitts, and you live in St. Kitts, so you vote in St. Kitts.
Okay, what about the people who live outside of the Federation?
But because
they have thrown in their lot with foreign entities, and they can vote in.
Don't tell me about
because they are registered.
Let's do this. All about it.
We're speaking about I'm living in St. Kitts. I visit home regularly. I have property in Nevis. I'm talking about the scenario with Nibichans living in the United States. Haven't been home for 5 years, but yet still these people can jump on a plane and come and vote. I live in St. Kitts. My name is registered in St. Kitts. Something should have been there. But I should have been able to get the
Mr. Brantley, go ahead. Mr. Brantley, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Brantley.
Webber, I sought to address this very issue on a different program some time ago. And it is of some interest to me that Nivisians living in St. Kitts, and obviously there are many of them, and this caller is correct that they do contribute to Nevis and continue to maintain connections with Nevis. But the provisions that Nevis is dealing with and the provisions of the Constitution which we are now exercising are provisions that have been there since 1983. They're nothing new. And what Clause 113 provides is that the referendum will be held, and those people who are entitled to vote on that referendum are people who would be entitled to vote in elections in Nevis. That is, put differently, people who are registered to vote in Nevis.
Okay,
it's
just a second. Caller, go ahead.
Mr. Brantley, what I'm saying is that this is a fundamental issue. This is a matter of life and death. We have seen that it is not just that divisions in whichever part of the world should have an input. You don't tell me that a Guyanese come in and live in Nevis could have more rights because by the Constitution he can vote in Nevis. Are you born and bred in Nevis?
Okay, well, just a second. Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Ben.
Caller, could I just respond in this way? That if what you're advocating is that the law be changed, the Constitution be changed, to allow you to vote in St. Kitts, where you're registered to vote, where you live and are registered to vote, and vote in Nevis. No, let me finish. Vote in Nevis, which is a different part of the same country, because what you're advocating, caller, is similar to you voting in Sandy Point and having cast your vote there because that's where you were born and that's where you grew up and that's where you have your land left to you from your mother, and your brother still live there. You cast your vote in Sandy Point, and then you come to Bastia where you now live, and you cast your vote there again, because that is the reality here. The bottom line is that the constitutional provisions have been there for 20 years, and if now what you're suggesting is that they be amended or changed to allow Nivisians living in St. Kitts to vote in Nevis for purposes of this referendum but for no other purpose, then that's a different argument. But I'm simply saying that the state of the law as it now stands does not allow you to vote twice in the same country. And so what you need to do is that if you are interested enough, then there is a mechanism for you to transfer your registration to Nevis, and that will give you the right to vote in Nevis.
And then while you're at that, changing that, somebody's going to argue, well, you need to change it so a person living in Nevis can vote in St. Kitts too.
Well, you see, but that
okay.
But
Mr. Brantley's suggestion is the solution. End of story. If you're a Nivisian registered in St. Kitts and you're that interested in the future of Nevis, I suggest you go down to your electoral office and apply to transfer your vote to your home constituency in Nevis. End of story.
Good evening. Thank you for holding. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yeah, good evening, Webber. Everybody talking, saying all kind of things, Whenever the referendum come, I come in one go vote. Y'all listen what them say. I don't get my name and the voters list, and that's all I want. Good night.
Good night. Mr. Stanley, yes.
Well, you see, all along I've complained that the framers of the Constitution were sound asleep when they put this document together. The information that came by my desk, although I shouldn't really say it, but again, let me just make this point once and for all. The Constitution that we are now embarking on for an independent Nevis almost has taken the same route, whereas all the people, although it was done on a calling program where we made our contribution, I still think through a constitutional convention mechanism to be able to cover all the boundaries, because here there are people who should have been given the right to vote. This is not an election in the true sense of the word. This is something distinct, separate and apart from the run-of-the-mill elections. And again, the framers were sound asleep. Either they were asleep or they were drunk when they put this document together.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening again, Rebel. Rebel, I would just want to suggest something. I mean, a lot of lawyers there, and maybe they can help me out. With this magnitude of what secession means in division, I would suggest that people have to live here on the island 90 days before they could vote, and no person from other country can come in.
Caller, with all due respect, here's the problem. We are not in a position at this juncture where we can change the rules. It's like playing a game of cricket. Once you done start with the rules, when the game is going, you have to play by the rules. So we understand what you're saying, but I don't know whether or not we want to belabor the point. Yes, Mr. Brantley.
For the benefit of those listening, because I know this can be an emotional issue, and for the benefit of the caller who rang in before, Nivision calling from Sinkers, I have before me the Constitution, Section 113 of the Constitution of St. Kitts and Nevis. And Section 113, subsection 3 says this: every person who, at the time when the referendum is held, would be entitled to vote at election of representatives held in the island of Nevis, shall be entitled to vote on a referendum held for the purposes of this section, in accordance with such procedures as may be prescribed by the Nevis Island Legislature, for the purposes of the referendum, and no other person shall be entitled so to vote. So this condition, this requirement, this criteria has been set some 20 years ago in the 1983 Constitution, that the people who are entitled to vote in this referendum are those who are entitled to vote at elections of representatives held in the island of Nevis. In common parlance, that means you have to be registered to vote in Nevis. It's as simple as that.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
We will go in independence.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening.
A young voter there. Yeah, good evening, thank you for holding.
Okay. I'm glad for this program tonight. In 1970, the people of Nevis was eager to get their independence because they did not know what they were getting into. But now in 2003, the people are more educated of the consequences and what they are about to do. In the past, the government of St. Kitts was not giving a listening ear to the voice of Nevis. But now in 2003, the people are eager to listen and dialogue. So why not the people of Nevis, the government of Nevis, dialogue with the St. Kitts government for the betterment of the people of Nevis? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, let me just say, dialogue is one thing, and we as a party and as a government has been dialoguing with the Labour Party in St. Kitts. But the question is that things have not changed. We have not got anything from the Labour government because they're not in a position to give us anything. They're not in a position to give us anything. Aid come in and it goes to St. Kitts and it doesn't come over here.
Mr. Hudson, Mr. Daniel made an interesting point. He said a lot of people are talking about ain't getting this, ain't getting that. Independence is not about getting money. It's about something else.
No, but I mean, what they're trying to put forward is the view that since we are getting on, since we are not causing any great emotion between St. Kitts and Nevis, and we took that position over a year ago, that we're not going to fight the Labour Party on anything.
Mr.
We are going to get on as best we can.
Quickly.
Well, all I want to say is that I find the underpinning of this caller's argument to be interesting. In 1970, when Nevisians were uneducated, let me try and use his language, uneducated, we wanted independence. But now that in 2003 we're educated, independence is a bad idea. I find that very, very interesting, because I would have thought that as the people developed, educationally and otherwise, that is a time when they would be better able to to take control of their own affairs.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, how are you?
I'm well, how about you?
I'm good. 2 points. The caller who called from St. Kitts said he's in a vision and he would like to vote in the secession. Why is it that he never wanted to vote in the local elections, he only want to vote in secession? Under the Constitution, you vote in the local election for Nevis, you vote for secession. You can't vote in St. Kitts all the time and then all of a sudden want to come to Nevis to vote because of secession. We're not going anywhere after independence. We'll be here just as we were here after independence from Britain. Second point, last Thursday in the House of Assembly, after the presentation by Mr. Gisha, Mr. Honorable Chief Library Governor presentation.
Ma'am, could you lift your voice?
Yes, which I thought Mr. Cedric Library gave a presentation which I thought was very interesting and very instructive to all right-thinking and progressive-minded division, because he brought 2 points out. The first one was that he went to a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association conference in Trinidad, and he went representing St. Kitts and Nevis, and lo and behold, somebody from Nevis was over on the other side of the table, and that must stop. That must end. And because we were sitting as equal partners, and that should not be. Those were his words. He said he went to some other agricultural conference, I think it was either St. Lucia or St. Vincent, somewhere down in Windward Island. And the same thing. He went as the Minister of Agriculture for St. Kitts Nevis, but yet still Nevis had a Minister of Agriculture there at the same conference, sitting down at the same table with him as an equal, and that should not be, and that has to come to an end, and that should tell Nevis people what that means. If you don't understand, God have mercy upon us. Have a good evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, you're on the air.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I've been listening to your program for the last hour and a half, and I got the impression that the panel is saying that the NRP or Mr. Parry is against the independence of Nevis. Is that what they're saying?
Quickly, that's...
Well, I'm not sure what Mr. Parry is saying, because as I said before, Mr. Parry came out quite clearly.
You're not sure what he's saying. Mr. Brantley, what did you say?
That is the only conclusion I can draw.
Mr. Stanley, what did you conclude?
I have concluded that Mr. Parry is against secession and he's against independence for Nevis at this juncture.
And Mr. Yearwood?
I concur.
Okay, so, caller, continue.
Yeah, I'm for the independence of Nevis, but I believe every individual has a right to express their opposition to anything that the government, whether NRP or the CTF, does say, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I am worried about when we get independence, what will happen to anybody who wants to oppose the government, whether they will have rights and who will look out for their rights and the protection.
Who is looking out for it now?
Right now?
Yes.
Well, I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I don't know what the Constitution consists of. You know.
Okay.
Well, the Constitution is just published. You can go by the administration building and pick up a copy of the Constitution.
Speaking of, are we speaking of the future Constitution of Nevis?
That's what he's talking about.
No, gentlemen, you know what, as I hear the different debates and the discussions and the questions and the concerns, when people ask a lot of the questions, as I asked the caller a little while ago, well, I want to know this, I want to know that. And I will ask the question, well, did you know it before? Well, I want to know who is going to pay the civil servants then. Do you know who is paying it now? You see, so what we're trying to do is to get beyond that and really provide some answers. Good evening, thank you for sorry about that. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening. This is Mr. Igwe again. I would like to ask the panelists another question. They have been using these two terms interchangeably. Secession and independence. Do they mean the same thing? I don't think so.
Secession, of course, means the separation, and independence is separate and apart and being on your own. But again, independence for an individual or each person in Nevis might mean different things. And I would say that at this juncture, nations, when they look at independence, there's more interdependence than independence.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yeah, good evening, Weber. Two observations. I noticed Mr. Parry was invited to the Chamber of Commerce luncheon in St. Kitts to speak. And in his words, I'm wondering if one of the reasons they invited him is because of him being like a bicycle, where they could get him to say what they want here. Because in the process, I think he lost his direction. The second thing, Mr. Yearwood this evening tried to justify the roads in Banzo being in the state that they're in now, when the Nevis Reformation Party was in charge, and we shouldn't be too bad because there was no money. If Mr. Yearwood examined the road going up to Hamilton, and the one going up through Wally Mountain, where up until a couple of years ago there wasn't anything much going on, you would realize that there was money to put roads down. But I think maybe Bansko Road wasn't of any consequence, which came out in one of the comments made by some of the panel. Good evening.
I think in answer to that, as I recollect, both the road going way up above Hamilton and the road over by New River, they were aid money given by the U.S. It was agricultural aid, and they refused to allow the government of Nevis at that time to place them anywhere other than it was going out into the bush and would be what they call agriculture feeder road. It is one of the insanities of foreign aid of that time. And so the Nevis Island administration, it was a gift, and they had no choice but to put the road where the aid agency out of the U.S. told them to put it.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening.
30 seconds.
What I'm calling to say is that we in Nevis has made this secession thing a parry and banter, and it's really sad. And again, I feel like both sides of the political divide has made a mess, the whole hash of secession. System is saying independence. Aren't we independent? We went independence in 1983. So aren't we independent where we are right? And Parry is saying full autonomy. I mean, really, I don't really understand what's going on, because both political parties have made a mess of the situation, and that's basically where the big problem lies.
Can I ask you a question, caller?
Sure.
You as an individual, because we've been looking at this other aspect, are you been able to analyze it and will be able to make a decision when the time comes?
Well, my decision has already been made. I'm going to be voting no.
Okay.
I mean, I don't need no politician, I don't need no town hall meeting. My mind has been made up long time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening, you're on the air.
This question goes to Mr. Hobson.
We can hardly hear you, sir.
This question goes to Mr. Hobson. At the present moment, we have...
Okay, do you have a radio or television on?
Yes, sir.
Could you turn it down, please?
This question goes to Mr. Hobson. Right now we have the airport and we have the seaport, which economy you think Nevis would fly better pathway we had to go to independence. Is it all true?
Sir, we can hardly understand what...
It's even more fragile. And I realize we are moving away from agriculture, which is supposed to be an industry we could help us grow fully.
Okay, Mr. Hobbs, I think he's asking what will be your major economic activity?
Economic activities like all the other Caribbean territories or the Caribbean nations. In tourism, we are up front with upscale tourism. We are in the offshore industry.
But he's suggesting that things are on the downturn now.
Well, is it on the downtown in Jamaica, in Trinidad, in Barbados, in all those countries that depend on tourism? They all depend on tourism, especially in the Eastern Caribbean. They have nothing else. The banana industry in the Windward Islands have collapsed. So all they are focusing on is the two industry that we are focusing on here.
Okay.
Offshore industry and tourism.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hello, good evening, Reverend.
Half a minute.
One issue I want to talk about. I think the politicians are making a mess of this recession thing. I think we need to get down for the younger people of the island and deal with the issues of the country, the problem that is facing the country, and not pick on the politicians, because the politicians...
Okay, who you think should deal with it?
The politicians should deal more with the issues.
But you just said they're making a mess of things.
Yeah, because they're making it sound like it's political, and secession or independence for Nevis is more than political. It's about the issues of the countries and the status and the financial background of the country and things like that. Things that we got to live with after this secession has come about.
So you want the politicians to deal with it, but you wanted them to deal with it differently?
No, I wanted to deal with it as in an issue and not like Harry against NRP against secession, things like that. Issues. Bring us issues, because we the young people, we like independence, we want to go now, but we want to know how would it benefit us and what's out there for us. We don't just want to leave our parents home like that.
Yeah, Mr. Brantley.
Caller, this is Mark Brantley. Could I ask, have you been attending or listening to any of the town hall meetings that both political parties have been having?
Well, because of my working hours, I haven't been able to attend the town hall meetings.
Because you see, that is an effort that they have made, and I think a commendable effort, because in no other independence movement have I seen in the Caribbean has such a concerted effort been made to put information at the disposal of people. So what other mechanisms would you like to see to bring information to your attention?
Or the status of the country. I mean, how is it standing in terms of the country? How will this benefit us?
Yeah, but caller, I think what Mr. Brantley is asking is they deal with those issues at the town hall meeting. You said that you cannot make it because you're working.
I'm judging from your program tonight.
Okay, but we don't have any.
Yes, but Webo, the government published since in July a white paper on its quest for the independence of Nevis.
Yeah, but here's the problem, Mr. Hopston, the other members of the panel. Don't the public and the citizens have a responsibility themselves to avail themselves of the different information and so on? Don't they have that responsibility?
I'm not going to bite my tongue. I'm going to say bluntly that they do have that responsibility. But regrettably, Nevisians, in the main, have almost an aversion, it seems to me, to go out and actively seek out information. You have these town hall meetings, and I attended an NRP town hall meeting at the flats, and when I entered and I counted, there were 14 people there. I know the NRP has substantially more support than that, but it has nothing to do with the NRP. I know that the people in that community are substantially more than 14. And interestingly enough, Webo, that when I looked around the 14 that were there, many of them were elderly people. And they had come out, and here they were at 10 o'clock at night listening. But a lot of the same constituency that this young man spoke about, the young people, they're too busy. They're home. So
it's just sometimes maybe a smoke screen to mix up the debate.
Because you see, one of the difficulties I have, Web, I don't know if you recall, well, you would recall, that a couple of years ago when Nevis was going through the same process, you heard the constant cry. No education, we're not getting any information, the people aren't educated.
So it's just rhetoric?
To my mind.
Okay, let me take this. We're running out of time. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yeah, good evening, Michael. How are you?
I'm well. Go right ahead. You got about 20 seconds.
Mr. Hopson there, he was speaking about tourism.
You got to do it in 20 seconds.
Because I want to know what sort of tourism the Nevis have. Because I got so many countries in the Caribbean, and Nevis have the lowest, totally the lowest grade of tourism. Listen to this. When I go to St. Martin, it's 4 and 5 I see. I go to Angola, it's 3 and 4, and 3 plus is the whole lot.
Okay.
Even to think it's 3 and 4.
All right. So Nevis, I think I got your point. Dear Mr. Hobson, quickly.
Yes, what I'm saying is, when you look at the economy of Nevis and what has been happening here, it is supported and financed by tourism and the offshore industry.
Okay, here's our final call. Good evening. 10 seconds. You have your radio on, sir?
Yes, sir.
Could you turn it down?
Yes, sir.
Yes, quickly.
Yeah, I mean, like, if I listen to tell me exactly what Nevis is benefiting from thinking to spell thinking.
What is Nevis benefiting? Anybody, quickly? Mr. Brantley, quickly. What is it benefiting to stay?
Nothing. It doesn't benefit.
Mr. Stanley, what is it benefiting to stay?
Well, truly, if we have a person who backs a note at the bank and the money comes in and there's a spin-off within the economy.
That's what is benefiting. Mr. Yearwood, what is it benefiting to stay?
The island of Nevis per se, I don't believe benefits a great deal by staying with St. Kitts, but I believe the people who live on Nevis do.
That's Alistair Yearwood. You also heard from Ted Hobson, Mark A.G. Brantley and Edric W. Stanley. That was our panel. Earlier we heard from Washington Archibald and Simeon Daniel by phone. We had tape recordings of the Premier of Nevis, Vance Amory, and the opposition leader, Joseph Parry. Facilitators of this program, the NIA Press and Public Relations Department, Cable TV of Nevis Limited, web hosting and developers, Net.kn on St. Kitts, Eastern Caribbean Powerhouse, Vaughan Radio. The sponsors for this program, Superfood Supermarket, S.L. Horsford and Company Limited, Bagging House Retail Outlet, and Swagler Guest House in St. Martin. Video production engineers, Huey Sargent and Stuart Jeffers of the NIA Public Relations Department. Camera operators, Judith Descent and Malcolm Ramsey did a spectacular job too. Technical assistant, Kevin Barrett, Spurgeon James and Brian Dow. Editorial assistants from Marcellus Lee and Desiree Otley of Vaughan Radio, and the executive producers were Carolyn Lawrence Bazzi of Cable TV, Charles Busu of the NIA Public Relations Department, Wayne Watley of St. Kitts, and our own Alman Basin. We thank everybody for their effort in this particular program. We thank you, our listeners. Join us again next Tuesday evening for another edition of the Let's Talk program. This is your voice in the community, the talk that gets results, and I'm Everett Weber Herbert. You all have a good evening.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts or call them at 466-4938. The views